Welcome, investors, to the Absolute Return Podcast, your source for stock market analysis, global macro musings, and hedge fund investment strategies. Your hosts, Julian Klimachko and Michael Kesslering, aim to bring you the knowledge and analysis you need to become a more intelligent and wealthier investor. This episode is brought to you by Accelerate Financial Technologies. Accelerate, because performance matters. Find out more at accelerateshares.com.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Absolute Return Podcast. On today's show, we welcome special guest, Hedgineer Founder Michael Watson. Hedgineer is a technology company focused on applying AI, data science, and risk management software to hedge funds and asset managers. On the show, we discuss how he made the leap from working at Citadel to founding his own startup, how hedge funds are implementing AI, where AI is most impactful within investment firms, how the future of AI in investing will play out, and more. So with no further ado, here's our show on Inside the AI Hedge Fund Revolution with Hedgineer founder Michael Watson. Excited to have Michael from Hedgineer on the show today, chatting about AI, hedge funds, and the future of investment management as we go through this technological revolution that seems to be picking up speed on a daily basis. Like there's just so much innovation and development happening on the AI side. It's like moving at the speed of light. But with that said, Michael, why don't you provide us with an introduction? I know you spent more than 8 years at Citadel, running technology, data engineering. Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, Julian, pleasure to be on. Yeah, so you mentioned my former employer. We don't need to go too much in the weeds on them, but when I was there, I ran all of the long-short equity technology that would be used for research and portfolio analytics, risk, talent assessment, and be able to turn that franchise or those three franchises into conveyor belts of alpha generation, where you put really talented people with great systems and data, and you can produce a very steady stream of returns that have the risk profile that platform's looking for. And so basically lived and breathed in that world for a long time. Like started as an individual software engineer focused on risk, built a data catalog, ran data engineering, eventually ran all the technology behind those franchises, and left to build out Hedgineer, where we built similar like best practices in terms of infrastructure, data, et cetera. And that's what we started about 3 years ago. And then the whole AI tailwind has just transformed the business. And now we just do AI implementations for asset managers and funds. We're on the ground floor for a lot of times when an organization is first deploying out Cloud Enterprise. We're now working with some larger, more quant funds and doing all of the training and development for their like 100, 200 person engineering team so that they're using just best in class workflows with Claude and other agentic tools. And like on the ground floors, we go through these pretty transformative deployments, all with institutional managers. So like we mainly work with funds on the smaller side, like around 500 million in AUM up to 50 billion, primarily discretionary, but that's not only the case anymore. Cross asset class, so we'll work with equities, equity long short, equity both venture and private and publics. And then on the credit side, we'll work with special sitch, distressed, high yield, some managers that do structured products, and kind of everything in between, both for like the research workflows in the front office and then also operational, like pre-trade, post-trade, treasury management, and then even into like marketing, investor relations. Because a lot of the firms that we have, they're more institutional in the sense that they have different workflows, processes, systems. Sometimes that corresponds to also different people as you start getting bigger. That a lot of this information needs to flow through efficiently, and AI has been kind of transformational across the board. And we just get a lot of at-bats of doing this over and over again. So we can afford to have war stories. You know, like we can afford to make mistakes and learn from them. And a lot of people, when they were doing AI deployments, if you look at some of the people that have had churn in their AI teams, they didn't get the luxury of making mistakes. And so we're kind of at a point where we have a pretty well-oiled machine of how we deploy AI effectively in these asset managers. And now we're just going and chopping wood. So it's been great. Just start a company, take a lot of the experiences and expertise that you develop over your 20s and 30s, and then kind of transition into your 40s where you're like, hey, like I think I can actually like put this together, take out all of my like last couple decades of experience and assemble like a great experience, great set of tools and systems that we deploy out.
That's great. I do want to double click on that. I'm always interested in people's journey as they transition, as you did, from, say, a large multi-manager hedge fund to founding your own startup.
Yeah, I think one thing that at least it was true for me is that it doesn't feel that different what I do right now to what my experience was at where I was at in my previous company. I think that there was a lot of reward for entrepreneurialism as opposed to entrepreneurialism. It's entrepreneurialism, same concept, but you do it within a company. And I do think at my previous, I'll say the name Citadel, they did reward a lot of entrepreneurialism. And so I think I always thought of what I was doing there as though I was running my own company and trying to grow the company, add value, have more people using my tools, have people saying great things and like getting joy out of your customers. Most of my customers there were fundamental analysts, data scientists, PMs, other people in operational workflows. But like, how do you build your own brand and company there? And so like doing that outside of that environment, there's like additional challenges. Like one is people don't have to use the thing that you're building. Like it's like, never mind, I'm just not going to pay you for this. In the same way that eventually in that environment, they can let you go. And I think they have a healthy culture of embracing that, or not healthy, however you want to interpret it. But like, there was an element of like, you have to eat what you kill in that previous world. And I think that did reflect, that had a lot of similarities going and building your company here. I mean, the things that you don't have here is, right, like the second you leave one of these bigger brands, you're only as good as what you've done recently. You have no company, you have no brand, you have no logo on your Patagonia that you can walk around Midtown with that gives you this stamp of approval. You're just your name and what you can do for me right now. Like where you used to work great, you don't work there anymore. You're a nobody. You have to go and like prove that what you can do is justifying the money that I'm going to pay for you. And you have to go and eat what you kill in the real world. And I think that's a very healthy experience to go through. But I think losing that brand association that you get with some of these firms, I think that was one of the things that like everyone kind of has to go through as they go out and do their own thing. And then you realize you don't have any of those resources. Like you want to go and recruit, go figure it out. Go on LinkedIn yourself. You want to go and get your first customer, pick up the phone and call. You want to figure out how you do a CI/CD deployment into cloud, build it yourself. You want to go and figure out like how these models work or how you use these agent tools. Watch a damn YouTube video. You don't get an expert that you get to call. Now, I mean, you can't call people, but the extreme self-reliance that I think you need to have when you do start your own thing, I think it's very healthy. But you realize how good you had it when you had all of these great resources and systems and people at your disposal, that a good company's job is to be able to assemble those resources for their employees that you have in that previous life. When you go and start your own thing, you got to start from scratch and do them anyways. But what you do have is you have all of the great learning, experience, resilience that you've been able to hone in yourself to be able to go and persevere through that. So at least I was able to carry that with me.
Yeah, certainly the credibility can take a while to build when you're not part of a large organization and you're starting something new on your own as a new brand and a new business in the market. Now, with that, you launched Hedgineer. What was the original insight behind the company?
Original insight was a lot of things that you build within larger asset managers like security masters, data infrastructure, dashboards, like how you build out an estimates database, how you model out companies, how you understand relationships between companies and instruments, how you do portfolio analytics, or like, let's say risk decomposition, especially in the equities world. Like those workflows are very similar. Like if you look at the things that you have at like an MLP or a Bali or a Citadel or like a Walleye, they all have different flavors of the same software. And so if you wanted to like start trying to service smaller firms, you could implement some best practices and then redistribute that where you don't have to build it from scratch each time. So that was generally the narrative of what we originally started out on. It had nothing to do with AI. It's just there's opportunities for economies of scale. We understand a domain really well. We can go and transform that domain understanding into software and then redeploy that with some white glove services on top at scale for like an asset manager clientele that's, like I said, in that price point between like 500 million AUM to 10 billion AUM, primarily discretionary. The similarity with discretionary managers is they oftentimes don't have as much technology or systems, but they have enough scale, especially as they went maybe from 500 million to 5 billion, that what got them there doesn't necessarily get them from that 5 to 15. And so that oftentimes requires technology. That's a different core competency. And so that was pre-AI, the type of customers and clients that we were most successful with. And it was great. Like we started a company profitable, like hired some great people, made some mistakes, had some really good wins. And then AI has just like really transformed that. I think that for us, when we got private preview access to Claude Code in 2025, it really started changing the way that we were thinking about how you scale expertise. And how you can have especially on like the technology side of how you can understand a domain problem. For example, let's say about how you can derive NAV, like the net asset value of a fund, from individual transactions, as well as subscriptions and redemptions, and having accurate end of day pricing. And most people it's to understand how you could accomplish that with those kind of 4 pieces of information. And before, it was very complicated to build a system that could repeatedly do that. But then if you can articulate it effectively and you also understand technology really well, you can then scale that best practice of how you want to build a better system for calculating a complex organization's net asset value from core components and lean on Claude a lot to do that. And that's not our business. We don't do like back office NAV implementation, but I think that's just kind of one example that for us was very transformative in how we started thinking like, this is something that we can really start pushing very hard on. And we lived and breathed, I think, in the like understanding how Claude Code worked. I think that was the first agentic harness that we really dug into. And so for an agent harness, I think one way I like to think about it is LLM is just this massive power of light, this solar explosion of power. And if you want to take all the power of the sun and be able to then take a silicone wafer and carve out how you want that chip design, like with lithography, you need to really harness the power of light in order to have a level of control that could enable you to be able to create what are like the 3, 5, 7 nanometer chips that you have to rely on a combination of TSMC and ASML. And the agent harness is kind of the same thing, where you have this really powerful language model that can do incredible next token prediction, but you need a way to be able to transform next token prediction to be able to do the type of work that you want it to, so you can start controlling that light force or that light into doing an explicit set of tasks. You give it very discrete options. And then if you give it the right combination of discrete options with the correct context, it can do very powerful things. And so that's like, we've been doing a ton with that understanding of how the agentic harness works, primarily through understanding Claude Code, but also Codex, Open Code, Rue, Pi, Open Claw is almost a harness of harnesses, primarily to be able to build out like AI native asset managers at scale on our existing clients.
And so as AI provided this big unlock to your business and tangentially your clients, hedge funds, asset managers, where do you see the best use cases right now?
Across the board, I mean, where we have the most transformational impact within our clients is where we create a feedback loop where everything that a user, whether it's somebody on the front office research side doing due diligence by giving Claude access to a data room, or an analyst trying to model out a company from components up, is doing that with AI tool that allows us to capture everything. So we want to capture what is the prompt that the user's putting into the system. Oftentimes that's in cowork or codex, and making sure that that prompt flows into a data system that we can analyze later. Then when Claude decides to call a tool or goes through reasoning or pulls in a skill or delegates to a sub-agent, we capture all of that. When Claude then gives a response of what it actually says an answer might be or goes and produces a document, we need to capture that. And so by being able to follow the entire process of how a user uses AI to solve a problem, we can then identify what went wrong, what went right, how could this user be better with AI, what are they leaving on the table, how do they instruct it incorrectly, and then also what are the tools and context that Claude or ChatGPT or whatever AI model you're using should have had when it tried to accomplish this task. And by going through the process of capturing that data and then analyzing that data, coming up with what the root cause was that caused like a frustration or a failure, and then having a framework to solve that, in that world, it doesn't matter what problem you're trying to solve where it's most impactful. Because I think you were asking, like, oh, is it more impactful for front office research, or is it more impactful for like portfolio construction or market monitoring, or is it more impactful for back office cash reconciliation or portfolio financing optimization, or for doing recs against your PB versus the cash that you have within your shadow nav system, or for doing due diligence from your investors coming or being able to like create marketing material. So like it seems like the question you were asking me is like, which one of those is Claude most transformational to? And my answer is all of them. But what's transformational is being able to capture all of that and then have a system that can identify how you make each one of those verticals better. And that is what we focus on, and making sure that we orchestrate all of that within our clients' deployment of AI across the enterprise. And I think if you do that right, and you could follow what Anthropic's CISO is explained about how they do AI deployments within Anthropic. We make sure all of our clients do much of the same thing, and then we leverage that so that we can enable like an operational workflow from an AI perspective to make sure that those systems get better. And there's ways to orchestrate all of it. Happy to kind of go into what that looks like. It's a little technical. It's understanding what open telemetry is. It's a way to be able to get traces of every single thing that the AI is doing or that you're doing as an individual into one data model. You could then run agents on top. What we do is we run agents on top of that to analyze all of those different sessions. So for example, Julian, every time that you have a conversation with Claude or with ChatGPT, that you want all of that data is captured, stored within your cloud, stored within your environment. That's why I argue that's your organization's most valuable data assets. Any piece of data that you think is valuable, your organization's usage of AI, that's more valuable than anything else, because that will ultimately tell you everything that you need to know about how you can have AI run your business for you. It's that data is sitting right there. We make sure that you're capturing that. And then second of all, we make sure that it's being analyzed and understood. And then actions are taken on top of that to make the AI better the next time it tries to do a similar task. We probably break that down into three different ways. One is, how does the user get better with training and understand how to prompt better? Two, how do you provide better data, and primarily through the form of MCP, but it doesn't have to be, so that the model has the access to information that it needs to make better decisions. And then three, how do you have better system context around workflows, common knowledge? That's a combination of both skill libraries as well as a knowledge layer that the model can pull from when it needs to do various different activities on the behalf of users. But if you break it down to that three components, user improvement and training, data, and a knowledge layer / skill library that the model can pull from, that's the big unlock. And then you want to make sure all three of those are getting better. Users are understanding how to use these tools better. The data is getting better over time. And sometimes that requires some thinking around what is the underlying data layer, but oftentimes it's just being thoughtful on the MCPs that you're exposing, or an MCP gateway that normalizes those MCPs together. And then lastly, what is your organizational knowledge? Oftentimes that's included within a skill library, but sometimes you want to be able to like have an additional data platform data warehouse on top of that. But that's it. And so like if you can have your deployment of AI auto detect which of those three things are lacking based off of actual usage, and then just go and fix them. That's how you start having a flywheel that's really impactful. So if you have analysts that are doing special sitch due diligence, there's a myriad of different things that they need to be able to think through when they're going through deal covenants, new terms, opening up a new data room. But if you're doing that through the lens of Claude and like correcting Claude as it goes through a certain workflow and you capture all of that, and then you have another process that will pick that up and learn from it, say, hey, the next time you see these situations, follow the exact same things that he or she is instructing you to do, and then codify that within the skill library. The next time Claude goes and redoes that same workflow, as long as those skills have been described correctly in the front matter so that Claude pulls in the rest of the skill context, it's going, oh, now I realize that when I'm doing a covenant for this specific data room that I go to a different location, I'm not going to make that same mistake again. And then you have the user saying, oh, wow, Claude's actually learning. It's actually getting better. This is great. And so that's just a microcosm of how you actually deploy AI within the organization effectively so that you don't just focus on, oh, it only works for developer research, or it only works for back office, or it only works for portfolio or market monitoring. It should work for the whole firm. It's the same underlying next token prediction, LLM, underpinning all of this. And it's the same three levers that you have to pull to improve that in terms of users understand how to use it better, better data, better system context. And that has nothing to do with front office, back office, middle office.
Awesome. When at a higher level, I guess, it looks really great now that your business is focused on building on top of Claude. In the future, as other models catch up to on for Copilot and whatnot, do you expect that you'll become more model agnostic in the future, or will it still be completely focused on Claude?
100%. I think that there's right now we ride the Claude wave because Anthropic built the best ecosystem for managing enterprise-wide AI. Like that's just full stop. Like if you want to deploy on a skill library to cowork as well as to Claude Code, you can do that within one deployment in a GitHub repo and set that to auto deploy, and all of your users in those two environments just automatically get it. If you want to be able to deploy out an MCP server across Claude Code, Claude Cowork, Claude.ai, it's the same deployment. So like the ecosystem that they built there, that is what's differentiated Claude so far. But it's not the models. It's not just Sonnet or Opus are that much better. It's the ecosystem that they built. And so with that said, everything that we do, it just focuses on what does a good ecosystem consist of. A skill library is not something that's unique to Anthropic. Like Anthropic started the skill library. They started the concept of a skill as an open standard, and now everyone's adopted skill. So if we create a skill library, whether or not you use it for Claude or ChatGPT doesn't matter. So in that world, like we already are model agnostic. Same way with MCP. Like MCP started out of Anthropic. They made it an open standard. Now everyone uses it. And so that's essentially the same thing. And so in the way that you have usage analytics, open telemetry has nothing to do with Anthropic. Open telemetry has been a standard way that you understand lineage and traces for running software at scale. Now, we just happen to be using that for Anthropic, but OTel works for ChatGPT, it works for any other major model provider, it works for your Datadog, Splunk, all of these different systems all have OTel plugged in. We just made sure, because we've been running software and asset managers for our entire professional lives, that, oh yeah, now we're going to be deploying out AI. Of course we have OTel flowing through it. Of course we then look at the data to be able to understand how users are using this technology in the same way that when we would deploy software within an asset manager, we would look at data and say, like, what features are people actually using? Where are they struggling with using this software? How do we A/B test something and figure out what we should do next? How do you do that? You do that by collecting data. And so everything that I just described around how you deploy out AI within an asset manager has nothing to do with Anthropic. Anthropic just happened to be the best one that pieced all that stuff together on day one. And right now, I'm actually not even that bullish long term. I mean, I am bullish on Anthropic, but I do feel as though we're almost peak Anthropic because there is an element of model commoditization that exists. Right now, we have, I think we're sponsoring a team at Lehigh that I have running a side project for us. And they're basically taking every single agent harness and then every single model, running through a set of benchmarks and saying what produces the best results, what produces the lowest token consumption, which one's the fastest. And it doesn't matter, like that's not necessarily tying Claude Code to Opus and Sonnet. Claude Code is it's far more cost efficient to run it with DeepSeek than it is with, or DeepSeek Pro than it is with Opus or even Sonnet for sure. It's a little bit slower right now. We use the default hosted version. And also like a lot of that is hosted within servers that are outside of the US jurisdiction. So we don't really use that, but there's different ways that you can start assembling these things to use the best model plus the best harness. And then use your skill library, use your MCP layer, use your knowledge layer, and use your usage observability on top of all of that have nothing to do with Claude. So I think we already are like kind of agnostic in a sense where if every one of our clients is using what we consider to be best in class AI ecosystem right now, and they're also giving us the best love, right? Like they have the partner network. I've at least been on calls, not often, but at least I've been on a call with Kat, who's the product manager of Claude Code, asking us for feedback on all of that. I've been on conversations with their go-to-market team at Anthropic. If there's an organization that's giving us that love, that also is building a great ecosystem, like I'm a business person just trying to put food on the table for my family. I'm gonna go about getting business, adding value for our clients any way that we can. And right now, like that's the wave that I'm riding. But there's nothing that we're doing inherently tying our cart to that horse.
Yeah, it's an interesting notion, the potential commoditization of LLMs. And first it was OpenAI in the lead, and then Claude, and then Gemini, and then some of the open source. You mentioned DeepSeek, and those are becoming competitive. And you got to look at it versus cost. So there's a lot of factors that go into that choice. So it's good to keep it, keep your options open, so to speak. Now, with respect to, say, hedge funds initially deploying AI, where do you see the highest ROI, or where do you see the most rapid uptake?
Oftentimes data science teams. I think there's two different areas. You need somebody that's not afraid of code so far in order to make the most out of AI. Like they're comfortable going in and looking at code. They don't need to be an expert, but they're comfortable doing it. And they haven't necessarily done it now for the first time for the people that are doing the most impressive stuff. Now they maybe were never a developer, but they're somewhat comfortable with code. And then the second element is they're actually not a programmer. Like their pedagogical background has been in equity research, credit research, maybe operations, oftentimes data science. I think the people that are like best suited for this are the people that have been doing data science for a while. Maybe they were on the equity side. Now they're on, ignoring asset class, but like they were like the data science, like a sector data analyst. It's a title that exists within the industry. It's been pretty well understood. They've always had to understand a little bit of Python. They've had to write SQL. They also have to understand the business pretty well. And so those users are the ones that I think have used AI the best. So anybody that's doing kind of data science-y like work, they're the ones that are, I think, doing the most impressive type of work. I think there are a lot of associates that I've seen that are like, they wrote a little bit of Python, they've done some Python, maybe in their undergrad, they got a lot of exposure to that. They're AI-ifying their entire process. And then obviously a lot of people on more of the quant side that are doing, again, they're naturally comfortable with code, but the code has been a means to an end. I think that's the commonality of all of that. The code was never their job, it was a means to an end. And it's like all primarily there on the research workflow. There's been more in kind of like back office where people are automating their job, but I just don't think you see the same level of ambition. And that's not to be a knock on anyone that's doing like portfolio finance, treasury, or fund analytics. Now, there's a lot of people that are doing some really interesting stuff there, but the people that are incentivized right now, that are like the ones that work not already 16, 18-hour days, that were writing code even before this, but they were only doing that as a means to an end. They have a drive and an intrinsic motivation that I think has caught on really well right now with like this AI move. And that's where I think I see the most amount of interesting people just doing really impressive stuff. Hope that helps.
Yeah, and I feel like we're still very, very early stages in terms of AI adoption, particularly within hedge funds and asset management. Now, that said, just given the pace of innovation and everything that's happening, like the developments seem to be going at light speed, what do you think AI investing will look like in 10 years?
10 years?
Yeah. Or maybe 12 months or 24 months?
In 10 years, I couldn't, I can't, 10 years from now,
Maybe there'll be no humans left.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there still needs to be, people will still have capital, and human beings will still have capital, and they will allocate capital to the vehicles that give them the best risk adjusted returns. And that will be, that decision making process will be driven by AI. Like, I will not make a discretionary allocation as a human being from an allocator's perspective of a pension fund or a teacher's retirement program. The boards will not be, I mean, there'll be the board, there'll be humans that are likely overseeing the board, but those decisions will not be made by humans. They will be made by AI. Those allocations will be. And the redemptions and the types of data that flows into an allocator, whether that's you with a 401k or a more institutional LP, will be near instantaneous, and you will get real-time feedback in terms of the performance of your investments with real understanding of any signal that exists, and justification for any fees that are being produced there. But that allocate, like the feedback loop, the manager assessment, and the allocation, that's 100% AI from the allocator side. On the manager side, you will have to use AI in order to have that feedback loop to the allocator be sufficient to justify any fees that you charge. And the only way that that can be done is if it is like 99% AI driven. Whether or not that manager is AI 100% or not will be a question of debate. But there'll be very few humans involved in that active manager role. I mean, again, in 10 years. But there will still be humans that have capital that capital is being allocated on behalf of humans. How that capital is then managed and value accrual by the manager, much of that is going to be driven by like AI. And the number of people involved are going to be in the very small. Eventually, that capital allocation will be the actual models themselves, the model providers, like the infrastructure players over time, like they will be allocators themselves, and they will be allocating to like AI driven workflows. Now it'll be a question like, is the allocator and the manager the same? I think that will be interesting, and I see that there will be more and more kind of, I think, convergence of those two. I think the specialization of the allocator versus the manager versus the allocator, as the allocator is primarily being driven by AI to begin with, I think that you'll see kind of more convergence there. But yeah, it's 10 years from now, but it's I think who an allocator is, I think, is going to transform as well. I think as governments spend more money on AI, you're going to see a larger allocation of government budgets going to AI as well. And so I think that you'll see just more accrual of value and cash reserves by AI entities or AI providers, not just coming from private enterprise, but public enterprise as well. So like their cash reserves, although right now it's very much debt driven, I do think that it's equity driven, but like there's a lot of debt going into build outs. But I think eventually that does start accruing a large capital reserve that I think will become a large allocator. And I think that those types of allocations will not be, won't be to the types of managers that you and I are used to right now.
Makes a lot of sense. Well, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks, Michael, so much for coming on this show, chatting about AI in hedge funds and investing, and the future use cases were just absolutely tremendous and so much opportunities there. So thanks for sharing your expertise and everything you got going on at Hedgineer.
Awesome, Julian. It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Michael.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for tuning in to the Absolute Return Podcast. This episode was brought to you by Accelerate Financial Technologies. Accelerate, because performance matters. Find out more at accelerateshares.com. The views expressed in this podcast are the personal views of the participants and do not reflect the views of Accelerate. No aspect of this podcast constitutes investment, legal, or tax advice. Opinions expressed in this podcast should not be viewed as a recommendation or solicitation of an offer to buy or sell any securities or investment strategies. The information and opinions in this podcast are based on current market conditions and may fluctuate and change in the future. No representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made on behalf of Accelerate as to the accuracy or completeness of the information contained in this podcast. Accelerate does not accept any liability for any direct, indirect, or consequential loss or damage suffered by any person as a result of relying on all or any part of this podcast, and any liability is expressly disclaimed.